We pulled beef from 14 major American grocery chains, Walmart, Costco, Target, Aldi, and 10 more, checked the grade stamp, checked the country of origin claim, and traced ownership all the way back to the packing plant behind every single one of them. 11 of these stores are selling beef that until literally this year could legally carry a product of USA label even if the cow was born and raised somewhere else entirely and only touched American soil on its way to the packing line. 2 of the 4 companies responsible for the overwhelming majority of beef processed in this country are majority owned by a single foreign conglomerate most shoppers have never heard of. And the store that's earned 3 strikes across this entire series for the exact same trick pulls it off a 4th time, just with a different animal this time. 14 stores, 1 cut of beef, and the labels are only just now starting to catch up to what they've always implied. Let's get into it. Quick word on method before anyone assumes we've got a walk-in cooler full of secret lab equipment. We don't. This one's mostly paperwork, and a genuinely surprising amount of it, more than any episode in this series so far. Honestly, we didn't run bacterial testing. What we did was check the actual USDA grade on every package, checked the country of origin claim against the rule that just changed, and traced ownership of the processor behind each label. First thing worth understanding, USDA grading. Prime, choice, select in that order, based almost entirely on marbling, the flecks of fat running through the muscle that make beef tender and flavorful when it cooks, assigned by an actual federal grader physically inspecting the carcass rather than a company self-certifying its own product. Prime is the top tier, historically a small slice of the entire cattle herd, though that slice has grown over the last couple decades as ranchers have bred more Angus cattle specifically to hit that mark, meaning Prime is genuinely more available today than it was a generation ago, even though it still commands a real premium at the register. Choice is what fills the overwhelming majority of supermarket meat cases in this country, the workhorse grade most households have been cooking without ever really registering the word stamped on the package. Select is leaner, less marbled, and noticeably less forgiving if you overcook it by even a minute, the grade most likely to turn into a hockey puck if you walk away from the grill to answer your phone. None of these grades are a food safety claim, they're a quality and consistency claim, and once you know which one you're looking at, half the guesswork in that meat case disappears. Second thing, and this is the one that actually changed while we were making this video. For decades, a beef package in an American grocery store could legally say, product of USA, even if the cattle were born and raised in another country, as long as the animal was slaughtered and processed here, a rule that made the phrase considerably less meaningful than it sounded on the front of the package. That's not a rumor, that's how the labeling rule worked for a long time, and ranching advocacy groups spent years pushing back on it, arguing that a rancher in Montana raising cattle from birth to slaughter was competing against imported cattle wearing the exact same American flag on the label by the time it hit the shelf. The United States Department of Agriculture finally tightened that rule, and as of this year, product of USA can only go on a package if the animal was actually born, raised, and slaughtered here, start to finish. Which means a lot of the beef sitting in stores right now was labeled under the old, looser rule, and some of what you're looking at on shelves this year is still catching up to the new one. So the claim on the package in front of you might mean something different, depending entirely on when it was packed, not on anything you personally did wrong by trusting the label at face value. Third thing, and this one's a genuine correction from an earlier episode in this series, because we said something close to the opposite about chicken. Growth hormones are actually legal and commonly used in conventional American beef cattle, unlike poultry, where hormones have been banned since the 1950s. A distinction that trips up a lot of people because the two claims look identical on a package, but mean completely different things depending on which animal is inside it. So, a no hormones added claim on a beef package is a real, meaningful difference from the conventional case next to it, not the empty legal requirement we flagged with chicken. Worth remembering exactly because it cuts the other way this time, and it's a good reminder that these labeling rules are genuinely different animal by animal, no pun intended. So the lesson from one aisle doesn't always transfer cleanly to the next one, which is exactly why we keep doing this store by store instead of just repeating the same checklist across every single video. Fourth thing, grass-fed does not automatically mean grass-finished. Plenty of cattle spend most of their life grazing and then get moved to a feedlot for the final few months to be finished on grain, which changes the fat composition and the flavor, and a label can lean hard on grass-fed language while saying almost nothing about how the animal actually finished, which is a distinction worth remembering the next time that phrase is doing a lot of heavy lifting on a package. Fifth and last thing, roughly 4 companies, Cargill, JBS, Tyson, and National Beef, process the overwhelming majority of the beef sold in this country, a concentration significant enough that it's been the subject of federal antitrust litigation over the last several years, alleging the major packers coordinated to suppress what ranchers were paid while consumer beef prices climbed at the same time, litigation that's produced real settlements running into the tens of millions of dollars from some of the companies involved, with more still working its way through the courts as of this year, and ranchers on one side of the transaction and shoppers on the other side, both ending up with legitimate grievances against the same handful of companies sitting in the middle. Keep all 5 of those in your back pocket. Let's go. Number 11, Meyer. Same Midwest loyalty as every single episode in this series so far, and the beef case runs almost exactly like you'd expect at this point, mostly choice grade, standard sourcing from the major packer pool, priced right where a hometown chain's house brand usually lands, right in the middle of the pack where you'd expect it to sit. Some of their value cuts are labeled enhanced, meaning a saltwater solution was injected before packaging to add tenderness and weight, disclosed on the label in a sentence small enough that most people never actually stop to read the percentage. Nothing dramatic here, just a quiet reminder that enhanced beef is doing the exact same trick we flagged with chicken and bacon, just wearing a steak knife on the packaging instead of a rooster. And honestly, by episode 4 of this series, you could probably guess most of this paragraph yourself before I finish typing it, which either means we're being consistent or we're becoming predictable. And I'm choosing to believe it's the first one. Number 10, Safeway and Albertsons, still running as one supply chain since the merger a few years back, and the beef case reflects the same 2-tier pattern their bacon did back in the last episode. The O Organics and Open Nature lines carry genuine grass-fed and no hormones added claims, real and meaningful this time, worth the extra few dollars if that matters to your household, and genuinely worth seeking out compared to most of what else is on this list. The much larger conventional Signature Farms case runs standard choice grade from the same major packer pool supplying most of this list. No special claim, priced to move. 2 logos, 1 loading dock, same story every single time, right down to the merger that keeps getting mentioned in every episode of this series, because it keeps being relevant in every single aisle we check, from the bacon case all the way to the ground beef bin. Number 9, Sam's Club, and the membership fee logic is back for round 4 of this series, which by now practically writes itself before I even sit down at the keyboard. Sam's Club is wholly owned by Walmart, so you're paying dues to shop a bigger version of the same company, a fact that's stayed true across every single category we've covered so far. Members Mark does carry some genuinely good prime grade cuts in the mix, credit where it's due, sold in bulk multi-packs at a price per pound that's honestly competitive with a lot of dedicated butcher shops. Some of the thicker cuts carry that enhanced solution disclosure too, worth checking before you buy a slab big enough to feed a football team or at minimum, a genuinely hungry extended family on a holiday weekend. The membership buys you bulk, and a real shot at prime grade if you know which tray to grab. It doesn't buy you a fundamentally different beef supply chain than the free-to-enter store down the road. Number 8, Kroger, and here's where the ownership story gets genuinely interesting again, same as it did with bacon. So stick with me even if you've never bought a single Kroger brand product in your entire life, because this fact applies well beyond just this one store and honestly beyond just this one grocery category. Kroger's Simple Truth line carries real organic and grass-fed certification worth something on its own, a legitimate premium tier backed by actual third-party verification. The much larger volume of conventional Kroger brand beef traces back to the same handful of major national packers, and 2 of those 4 companies, JBS and National Beef, are majority owned by Brazilian conglomerates, JBS through its own Brazilian parent company, and National Beef through a Brazilian meat processing group that's held a controlling stake for years. Most shoppers grabbing a pack of ground beef at Kroger, or honestly at a dozen other stores on this list, have no idea that a meaningful share of the American beef supply runs through companies headquartered thousands of miles outside the country, whose flag is printed all over the packaging right next to a product of USA claim that, as of this year, actually has to mean something again, which is a genuinely strange thing to sit with the next time you're standing in front of that case, deciding between two nearly identical packages of ground chuck. Number 7, HEB, and I know, Texas, cattle country, please don't come for me. I say this one with genuine love every single episode, and I mean it every time. HEB's Hill Country Fair beef runs standard choice grade through conventional sourcing, and the in-store butcher counters at many locations genuinely do more hands-on cutting than a straight private label operation, which is a real point in their favor worth crediting up front. The packaged beef in the regular case, though, traces back to the same short list of national packers as everything else on this list, including plants that are statistically more likely than not sitting somewhere in Texas or Kansas, rather than actually owned by the state's own ranching heritage, the packaging quietly implies. Independent ownership bought HEB a great reputation. It didn't buy them out of the same 4 packing companies everyone else is standing in line behind, no matter how many Longhorns are painted on the building or how good the breakfast tacos are 3 aisles over. Number 6, Publix. Employee ownership, again, genuinely rare, genuinely admirable. One of the largest employee-owned companies in the entire country. And it shows up more in customer service than in the meat case specifically, though it's still worth knowing while you're standing there comparing 2 trays and trying to decide if the extra few dollars is worth it this week. Publix's Green Wise beef carries real grass-fed and no hormones added certification, a legitimate upgrade over the standard shelf, and independently worth the extra cost if that's a priority for your household. The regular Publix brand beef a few feet away runs conventional choice grade from the standard packer pool. No special claim. Price to move. Same 2-tier story as almost every stop on this list, and the deli counter calling you by name doesn't change which tier ended up in your cart, though it does make the checkout line feel a little friendlier. Number 5, Wegmans, upstate New York, deep breath. I know exactly how fast this comment section moves by episode 4 of a series like this. Wegmans' beef program does include a grass-fed, no hormones added tier that's real and verified through their own supplier standards rather than a phrase that just sounded nice in a meeting. The broader beef selection is sourced through the same small circle of national packers supplying nearly everyone else on this list, just wearing a Wegmans label instead of the packer's own name on the wrapper. The produce section earned the road trip. The beef case is riding along in the same trailer as everybody else's, just with better signage pointing you toward it and a slightly more scenic parking lot to walk through on the way in. Quick pause because we're near the halfway mark and I want to name the pattern instead of pretending you haven't already spotted it 4 videos into this series. Almost every single grocery chain in this country runs the same 2-tier setup. A real premium line with genuine certifications sitting a few feet away from a conventional line sourced from the same 4 packing companies, and the price gap between them is usually doing more work than the actual sourcing difference. That's not us running out of things to say. That's just how consolidated this entire industry actually is. And honestly, it's a little bit wild that it took 4 separate grocery categories for that pattern to become this obvious. Onward. Number 4, Sprouts, and this is where the grass-fed versus grass-finished distinction actually matters most on this entire list, more than at any other stop we've covered so far in this whole series. Sprouts leans hard on grass-fed language across its beef selection, technically accurate and worth something, but grass-fed alone doesn't tell you whether that animal spent its last few months on pasture or in a feedlot finishing on grain, and Sprout's packaging rarely specifies which one you're actually holding when you pick up the tray. Some of their lines are genuinely grass-finished and clearly marked as such, which deserves real credit. It's just buried next to plenty of grass-fed language doing more marketing work than nutritional or flavor work, which is exactly the kind of small print distinction this entire series keeps circling back to, no matter which aisle we're standing in. Number 3, Target. Good and Gather's beef carries the same clean label push that redefined Target's grocery lineup back in 2019, real no hormones added and, on select lines, grass-fed certification worth crediting, and a genuinely more transparent packaging redesign than a lot of the competition managed in the same era. Here's the part that matters given everything we just covered about the labeling rule. Some of Target's beef sold earlier this year was still catching up to the new product of USA standard, meaning the claim on a package you bought a few months ago may have meant something meaningfully looser than the same claim printed on a package today, purely because of when it happened to be packed rather than anything Target did differently. The processor behind the label, like most private label programs on this list, is one of the same handful of national packers showing up at half the other stores already covered in this video, a fact that the millennial pink packaging works very hard to make you forget while you're standing in that particular aisle. Number 2, and like every episode in this series, I actually want to defend this one a little. Walmart, great value. Walmart is the largest retailer on the planet by revenue, and Great Value beef is exactly what it looks like. Standard choice grade, sourced through the conventional packer pipeline. No grass-fed claim, no hormone claim, nothing dressed up as more than it is. Some multi-packs carry the enhanced solution disclosure worth a glance before buying in bulk. Nobody walking down the Walmart meat aisle thinks they're making a specialty purchase. No pasture illustration, no rancher's signature on the label, no acoustic guitar in the ad, just a plain package telling you exactly what grade you're getting and nothing more. You know exactly what you're buying before it hits the belt, and it delivers precisely that. Least dramatic beef on the entire list, and by now, 4 episodes deep, you know that's basically a compliment, maybe the highest compliment this particular series is capable of handing out at this point. Number 1, Whole Foods, and if you've watched this entire series from the very beginning, you already know exactly where this is going. And honestly, at this point, we did too, the second we picked up the package, before we'd even flipped it over to check the fine print. Whole Foods requires no antibiotics ever, and no added hormones across its fresh beef, real, genuinely meaningful claims, given that hormones are legal everywhere else on this list, and full credit, where it's due for that. This is not a hollow claim the way it was with chicken. The global animal partnership steps we covered in the chicken episode apply to beef too, and Whole Foods' minimum required tier still sits at the low end of that scale, not the pasture-raised, slow-finished top tier the in-store marketing photography wants you picturing while you're standing in front of the case with a cart full of groceries you've already half decided are worth the premium. Here's the twist that's specific to beef, and it's a slightly different shape of gotcha than the one we found with chicken. Even the higher step, source-verified, grass-fed cattle at Whole Foods still has to pass through an actual USDA-inspected packing plant before it becomes a package in that case. And there simply aren't very many mid-size, independent processing plants left in this country to handle that volume. A bottleneck that got a lot of national attention a few years back when small processors couldn't keep up with demand, which means a meaningful share of even the good stuff at Whole Foods gets processed through facilities owned by the same small handful of major packers supplying the conventional stores at the bottom of this list. The ranch can be as different as the marketing implies. The plant it passes through on the way to your cart usually isn't. 4 for 4 if you're keeping score across this whole series, And at some point, that stops being a coincidence and starts being the single most useful thing you take away from this channel. 11 down. Here's what's actually worth putting in your cart. And yes, 3 genuinely good options are still coming even after all of that. Best option number 3, Aldi. Aldi's Never Any program covers real publicly documented standards, no antibiotics, no added hormones, across a meaningful chunk of its fresh beef lineup, backed by actual supplier requirements rather than a single phrase on the front of the package that nobody outside the company can actually verify. Aldi runs one of the leanest supply chains in American retail, a fraction of the SKUs of a normal supermarket, which has genuinely pushed pricing down without needing to disguise a commodity product behind a wellness aesthetic. It's still standard choice grade for most of the lineup. That part doesn't change, but the underlying sourcing standard is real, documented, and priced lower than nearly everything above it on this list, which continues to be one of the more consistently underrated grocery chains in this entire series. Episode after episode, category after category. Best option number 2, Trader Joe's. Same company-wide policy that's shown up in every single episode of this series so far, applied here without exception, which by now feels less like a coincidence and more like the one through line connecting the entire channel. Trader Joe's beef program skips the enhanced solution injection almost entirely, runs a consistently shorter label, and applies the same standard whether you're in a store on the East Coast or the West Coast. So you're not hunting through 2 separate tiers in the same case, hoping you grabbed the right tray like you would at almost every other stop on this list. The trade-off is the same one we've flagged before, a shorter shelf life because there's less engineering keeping it stable, which is exactly what honestly processed beef is supposed to look like, even if it means planning your cooking around a slightly tighter window than you'd get from a package sitting under a heavier dose of preservation science. Best option number 1, Costco. Not a vertically integrated farm story this time, like we found in the chicken episode a couple videos back, a genuinely different kind of differentiator this time around. Costco has become one of the largest single purchasers of USDA prime grade beef in the entire country, reportedly buying a share of the national prime supply large enough to noticeably move that market on its own. According to reporting on the meat industry over the last several years, that's tracked exactly this trend. That's not marketing language, that's a purchasing scale most single retailers simply can't match, built on long-term relationships with suppliers rather than short-term spot contracts, which gives Costco more leverage to demand prime grade at a price a typical supermarket couldn't offer without losing money on it, a genuinely different kind of leverage than anything else on this entire list. Kirkland signature beef isn't uniformly prime across every single cut. Some of it is still choice depending on the item, but the odds of finding real prime grade at a reasonable price are consistently better here than almost anywhere else on this list. And that's a genuinely rare thing to be able to say about a warehouse club that also sells tires and eyeglasses in the same building, sometimes within about 40 feet of the meat case itself. So here's what actually matters walking into any of these 14 stores. Whether you're stocking up for a full week of dinners or just grabbing something quick for tonight after a long day, check the grade stamp first, prime, choice, or select, because that tells you more about what you're actually cooking than almost anything else printed on the package. And it's one of the few claims on any meat package in this entire series that's been independently, objectively verified by an actual USDA grader rather than self-reported by the company selling it to you. Product of USA finally means what it sounds like as of this year, but plenty of older stock and slower moving private label lines are still catching up. So don't assume every package reflects the new standard yet, especially anything that's been sitting further back in the case. Remember that a no hormones added claim on beef is real and meaningful, unlike the same claim on chicken, so it's actually worth paying attention to here. One of the rare cases in this entire series where the obvious sounding claim turns out to be the honest one. Grass-fed is not the same claim as grass-finished, and if a label doesn't specify which one you're holding, assume it's the weaker version until proven otherwise. And remember that a meaningful share of the beef in this country, regardless of which of these 14 logos is on the front, runs through the same 4 packing companies, 2 of which are majority owned by a foreign conglomerate most customers have never heard mentioned, a detail that changes nothing about how the meat tastes and everything about how confidently you should trust the flag printed on the wrapper. Different package, different grade stamp, same 4 plants behind most of it. None of this means you need to interrogate a butcher counter every single week or drive across the state chasing a specific ranch. It means the grade stamp is doing more honest work than almost any other word on the package. The country of origin claim only just started meaning what you always assumed it meant. And the difference between a good beef purchase and a mediocre one usually comes down to reading 3 small pieces of information instead of trusting the photograph of the pasture on the front. Check the stamp, check the claim, and you'll know more standing in that meat case for 10 seconds than most of the people shopping around you. 4 episodes into this series now, and the pattern underneath all of them keeps landing in roughly the same place. A small handful of massive processors sit behind almost every logo on almost every shelf. The words doing the most emotional work on a package are frequently the ones backed by the least actual regulation, and the one store that keeps building its entire identity around being the exception keeps turning out to be running the same supply chain as everyone else, just with better lighting and a friendlier font. That's not a reason to stop shopping anywhere on this list. Plenty of genuinely decent products showed up even among the avoid entries. And nobody's asking you to boycott your neighborhood grocery store over a grade stamp. It's just a reason to spend 10 extra seconds reading the fine print before the tray goes in the cart. Because at this point in the series, you already know exactly what you're looking for, and that alone puts you ahead of most of the people pushing a cart down that same aisle this week, whether they've watched a single one of these videos or not.